So Dr. Andrew Novakovic is from Cornell University. He's the co-chair of the National Dairy Markets and Policy Program, and he will be our first speaker tonight.
Thanks very much. Morning, everybody. Yeah, it's important for me to find out what you guys are thinking about, to hear your perspectives on what's important and what's good and what's bad. And, you know, I know these things are kind of set up where I'm looking at you and kind of probably talk a lot, but I genuinely would very much welcome your questions, your comments, whatever. I come here because I was invited, but actually I come here because I always learn things when I get outside of Conference County. So I am truly pleased to be here.
Okay.
I have no foggy idea what President Trump is going to do or care about with respect to agriculture or agricultural policy. So you'll have to forgive me for not being able to be more insightful about this, but I thought maybe it'd be worthwhile to just sort of ask a little bit, something different that happened as a result of the change in administration. The United States Congress, of course, is still Republican. That hasn't changed. The players are a little bit different. But the fact that we now have a president who is the same party as Congress means, or at least suggests, that a good deal more could happen. It's obvious, and agriculture isn't by any stretch the best example, but it's obvious that there was tension between the Congress and the White House, and things didn't get done, and he vetoed some bills, and they felt like they couldn't do what they wanted to do. Felt like he couldn't do what he wanted to do. It's fairly clear that President Trump is going to be a little bit different than the mainstream Republicans, but they're going to be in the same club. So, okay. So it's reasonable to wonder, is this something that happened? The Farm Bill is usually something we think about every 5 years. It expires the end of 2018, so we've got a little bit of distance before that happens. But I can tell you that there are conversations taking place about pieces of that Agricultural Act of 2014 that folks are thinking they'd like to change or tweak or improve or open up and take a look at. This is not being done because the president-elect, soon-to-be president, has got some big agenda. It's more because there are other people who have an agenda and feel like maybe he'll be receptive. I'm sure you've all also noticed that the Secretary of Agriculture is the only major cabinet appointment that hasn't been made yet. There is a kind of a long list of potential candidates, not a single one of whom I would think of as a particularly dairy-oriented person. Most of them are former elected officials, either from governor's office or congressional office. I don't think there's going to be any particular dairy attention from that appointment, but nevertheless, there's conversations that are occurring, and the National Milk Producers Federation is pretty far along in thinking through some things they'd like to pursue. It got me thinking about what can get done and how can it get done, and I thought I'd spend just a little bit of time trying to talk about some of those parameters and sort of see if we can get a sense of what could be done. And of course, the stuff that's interest to folks in the dairy industry isn't just, you know, we're going to somehow fix the margin protection program, but just a whole bunch of stuff related to immigration, related to environmental regulations, and trade relationships and so on. So just a couple things. One of the things I often remind folks, usually when the news story is about a budget that the president has released, is that although I am completely certain that being president of the United States is just like a way cool thing, the fact of the matter is, in our form of government, the president can only execute the laws that exist, and he doesn't get to create the laws. And so when the presidents say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, or a candidate says, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, there's a real serious limitation on how much that can actually happen, especially if the Congress doesn't go along with it. And obviously, Congress gets to pass the laws, but unless there's a veto-proof majority, the president can block laws, which is, of course, the situation we've had pretty much for the last 8 years. So first of all, the president can only really do things that the Congress agrees to. It's also true that because of the rules within the Senate, it's not like some constitutional, but because of the rules that the senators impose on themselves, almost every decision has to have 60 votes, super majority. And we haven't had, I don't know when the last time was, we had a Senate where one party had 60 or more votes. Maybe in the Civil War or something that might happen, but it's not a normal situation. So that means the senators have to work a lot harder on finding programs that at least a few people in the minority party can reach. And that of course, is a little different than the challenge in the House, and makes usually for Senate bills looking a little different than House bills. There is one exception to that rule in the Senate, and that's a thing that you're starting to hear a little bit about if you care to follow this kind of stuff, which is called budget reconciliation. This is actually was in the news this morning. You're going to hear about it some more. And it's kind of a funny deal, but it's an important deal in that when the Senate or the Congress passes a budget resolution, what they're talking about is a plan. They're saying, we don't think we should spend more than this, or we think we should spend 10% less than we did last year. It's not a specific plan. It's not an appropriation where you say, here's the money to go do something. It's a plan. So from that standpoint, usually these budget reconciliations are not super powerful and potent. But one of the key things about budget reconciliation in the Senate is it only takes a simple majority. So if 51 or 52 Republicans are the only ones that vote for budget reconciliation, it passes. This is exactly how we got the Affordable Care Act 8 years ago, that was passed. It was passed by Democrats using the budget reconciliation rule, which I think we're now learning was a bad idea politically. I'm making no commentary about this bill. You can have your own opinions about that healthcare plan. But I think what we've learned is that when you have a legislation that is so partisan supported, you kind of invite the other guys to be upset. And now we're going to do the exact opposite thing, only this time it's Republicans that are going to vote for a budget reconciliation, and the Democrats are going to have no say about it. That is the way we're going to get changes in the Affordable Care Act, and it's a way that different people are now talking about, can we do this, do other things. The limitation of this, and it's why some of the people who are talking about Affordable Care Act are talking about, don't just tell me what you're going to get rid of, tell me what you're going to replace. A budget reconciliation bill can only be about money. So if you want to say you can't spend public money to subsidize healthcare premiums, okay, that's budget reconciliation. If you want to say insurance companies have to ignore pre-existing conditions when they issue policies, that's not, it has budget implications, but it's not a money issue. It's not about money. So you can't put that in a budget reconciliation. You can only put money issues in there. So budget reconciliation is a way to get rid of something that costs money, but it's not a way to properly do legislation. This may or may not have implications for ag policy. There are some people who are wondering whether or not it might be a way to do some stuff on ag. But that's an important consideration in terms of what can happen. The president can also do a lot of stuff with something that's called executive action, where the president issues an edict under his own signature and says, this is how we're going to do stuff. Now, he can't do something that the law prohibits he can't do something that goes beyond his authority as president. But there's actually a lot that a president can do by executive action. And one of those things would be how vigorously certain laws are enforced. So, for example, President Obama thought that maybe we should be a little more relaxed about certain immigration issues. So, children of people who came over illegally, he said, yeah, it's illegal, they shouldn't be here, but you know what, let's just not worry about that so much. Let's kind of slow walk that one and focus on something else. Likewise, President Obama was more aggressive in developing and enforcing environmental regulations. Well, you know, one scenario would be that President Trump goes in just the opposite direction. And this could make a really big difference in terms of the availability of undocumented workers and in terms of what kind of environmental regulations are in place, both of which obviously could have pretty direct consequences for dairy farmers. We don't know what he's going to do, but you know, there's definitely some reasons to think maybe there might be some things that will occur. With respect to sort of more normal farm bill stuff, there's an expectation that it's going to be really hard to get the attention of the U.S. Congress on agriculture, because oh my gosh, we got so many other things that we've been building up an inventory of that we want to deal with. But there are folks in Congress for whom this is an important thing, important to them personally, and they're going to try to push it. We're going to hear more and more about the national milk and anybody else's idea about fixing dairy. Soybean growers are already talking about the county option on AFC, and they want to make some changes there. Cotton guys are building a list of things they want to do. Sugar guys are building a list of things they want to do. So, I don't know, it's going to be a conversation, if not a lot of action. The last thing I'll say about this with respect to dairy especially, but also ag more broadly, is how much money do we have to spend on these programs? One of the reasons why the MPP dairy came out kind of limp is there wasn't much money allocated for dairy programs. And so you kind of got as much as it was decided you could afford in terms of the dairy program. I think most producers would say, yeah, wow, thanks a lot. The ideas that are being floated to improve, to tweak, to make MPP dairy better can only cost the government more in terms of budget provision. And so the obvious question is, where the heck is this money supposed to come from? And, you know, in theory, you could say, well, take some money away from corn bags. Corn growers, when you look at government expenditures relative to gross sales, what percentage of gross sales is government expenditures? Corn growers get 90 times as much as dairy farmers. 90 times as much. You'd think maybe they could have a couple crumbs fall off the table and triple our budget, but you know, it's just not as easy as it sounds. And so, will we do something? Will the president do something? Will we have the money to do something? All good questions. I actually think in the next year, you're more likely to see something of interest to you that comes through executive action on immigration, environment, maybe trade, than you are on kind of core ag policies. This table comes from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. You should have it in front of you, which probably is going to make it a lot easier to see than what's up here. Much as I'd love to talk 20 minutes on each number on there, that really isn't why I put it up. But what I want to do is give you a little sense of what the U.S. Department of Agriculture is thinking is coming down the pipe for us in terms of basic supply and demand. So this, of course, is real 2014, real 2015. This was the estimate that USDA made for 2016 when they sat down in December to do it. So obviously there was a lot in the can already. This should be a pretty close guess. This was the guess for 2017, also made last month. So it's, you know, it's a guess. It's a rawer guess than others. And what they're basically imagining is that milk production compared to 2016 is going to be up about 2%. They look at that on a fat basis and on a skim basis. We don't expect a lot of changes in milk composition, so the production number isn't the interesting one. But the one that starts to look a little more interesting is trade. So we do have some imports on a milk fat basis that we're thinking will be about level. It's a pretty small percentage of the total supply. When you look at imports on a skim solids basis, it's a little smaller number, pretty similar, and they're looking at that declining. Most of our imports are high quality cheeses, European style cheeses. There's some milk proteins, but mostly what we import is kind of fancy stuff that we don't make so much of, and you know, people enjoy from somebody else. If you look on the usage side, I left the production number up here just as a reference, but this is now looking again at a fat basis and a skim basis, and it's showing exports, domestic use, and total use, which is domestic plus commercial. 10 years ago, we didn't split out export use, but now export use has become kind of a fairly significant number. It's got a little activity, it goes up and down, and it makes a difference. And so USDA is now giving us more routinely detail on exports. If you look at exports on a fat basis, you know, it was better in 2014, kind of tapered off. But what this really shows is on a skim basis, that's where our exports are. Roughly 3 out of every 4 pounds of non-fat dry milk, skim milk powder, and dried whey products are sold overseas. 3 out of 4. So that is a gigantically important market for companies like Cube Milk Ingredients and the big powder companies on the West Coast and so on. So this is pretty significant for us. Represents 10 to 15%, a little closer to 10 recently, of the U.S. milk supply. When you look at what's being sold domestically, you can see the fat use number is up. It's projected to be up and has been marching up pretty nicely every year. They're projecting a little under 3%. On a skim basis, a little under 2%. This is also part of our story. We're exporting skim products, but we are consuming more fat-based products locally. And you know, this is after decades of feeling guilty about eating butter and drinking whole milk and having full-fat ice cream and yada yada. Now that tide really has turned. Milk sales, beverage milk sales in total are still declining, but whole milk sales are increasing. More and more, you're hearing people saying, "Oh, doggone it, if I'm going to have some ice cream, or if I'm going to have a glass of milk or whatever, I'm going to enjoy it." Heck. And so, particularly when we look at something like milk, but to some extent also frozen desserts, we're seeing people maybe not eating the same quantity, but saying, "I'm going to enjoy the quality." And in many cases, that quality is associated with a higher fat content. And so that's why we're seeing increases. That's part of the reason why we're seeing a little more bullish number on sales on the fat side than we are on the skim side. On the export market, we're not expecting increases. We think we might lose a little bit on the fat side, but we're expecting to get skim solid sales up in the vicinity of that they were in 2014, which was a pretty good year for us. So that part of the story is good. And it kind of helps us understand that the things that are driving the domestic market are pretty seriously different from the things that are driving the home market. This is some price stuff. USDA pays attention to prices of basic manufactured products. They use those to figure out class 3 and class 4, and then they boil that down to the all milk price. I'm just going to focus on the all milk price, but you can look here too. When they do this, by the way, I hope it's not too hard to figure out. when they talk about the price of cheese or the price of butter, they say at least this much, could be that much. And when the range is wide, that means they're going, I don't really know, but maybe. And when the range is lower, that obviously is saying they've got a little more confidence. It's not at all surprising that in December of 2016, the range is very narrow. And when you look at a year ahead forecast, the ranges are a little bit wider. But any one of these numbers is looking fairly positive by comparison to anything after 2014. 2014 is certainly the high watermark, but 2017, I don't think there's anybody in the U.S. who is thinking that it isn't going to be better than the last couple of years. So the only real question is how much better. When you look at that on a milk price basis, we're looking somewhere 17.25 plus or minus, which is certainly less than 2014, probably going to be better than 2015, and at least $1 or so better than we saw in the last couple of years, 2015, 2016. So that's hopeful. This chart, which I hope is something a lot of you recognize, comes from our website for the Dairy Markets and Policy Program. And what this is showing, it's also on USDA's website as part of their NPP dairy tool. As you would imagine, this red line is real numbers, actual data, stuff that's already happened. This dashed line is our projection of what the federal USDA margin would look like based on the numbers that are coming out of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So this is based on the Class 3, Class 4, cheese and butter-driven markets, and on corn and soybean meal that are traded on the exchange. It involves a little bit of estimating, but we try to do an honest job of that. We think it's a reasonable reflection of what the implication of all those numbers are on the beef cost side and the milk side. And obviously, this is showing a tremendous improvement compared to what we've had until you get back into 2014. You actually have to go back to the fall of 2014 when the market was starting to come down to find a number that was that high. And as you can see, I'm sure better on your handout, we're looking at something below 6 here, and we're looking at something about 11 there. So it's a very serious increase. Under MPP dairy, you can guarantee as much as an $8 margin. I don't know what you guys all decided to do, but I think the probability of anybody getting a payment on MPP dairy in 2017 is basically 0. But if you looked at LGM dairy, the one that's been around for a little while longer and works through RMA, you could actually lock in an $11 or $12 margin on LGM dairy this last month when the contracts were open. And so that gives you a real sense of the contrast between those two programs, but also the fact that expectations are for considerably higher margins. As you might guess, this green line, it's not like that's a good line or happy days are here again, but that's where kind of the average is. So we're going to be pretty well above average going into 2017. One of the things that it's all well and good to say, what does it look like now? I'm always interested too in how are things trending? Are people getting more optimistic? Are they getting more pessimistic, or pretty much not changing? And what I can tell you, and what I'm trying to illustrate in these graphs, is that since about the middle of the year, 2016, we started to get more confident about 2017. That's what this curve up is showing. I'm picking out the May contract for Class 3 and 4 futures. If you looked at contracts for the other months, you'd see basically the same pattern. And what it was saying is we were pretty well into the summer of 2016 before we started feeling fairly confident about what 2017 would look like. In the last couple of weeks, that's tapered off a little bit. There's a little bit of a concern, maybe it won't be quite as good, but the fact of the matter is, the only reason why that number looks lower is because we had a couple months where it was higher. By comparison to this, we're definitely more bullish. One of the reasons why there's a little bit of maybe we were a little too optimistic kind of a story going around is the last couple of trades in New Zealand on the so-called global platform where they trade various dairy products, mostly dried products. The results were a little bit lower than what people expected. So it's like kind of like move to maybe just a little too optimistic. I'm not saying that to inject some note of discouragement, but that's kind of where we're at. We're sort of feeling like 2017 is definitely going to be better. Not sure how much better. And when you look at this chart up here is showing class 3 and class 4 futures for every month. So this was the settlement price as of yesterday for January 2017, February, March. So we're seeing this rising up, but then tapering off towards the end of the year. This is a little bit what I'm trying to say. This is a little reflection that maybe things will taper off. Two things. One, if you look at that chart a month ago, there wasn't tapering off. Number two, tapering off in November and December is normal. So this isn't like some super horrible thing. Actually, that would be a normal price pattern. As you go into the holidays, typically the holiday demand has been satisfied before, and markets are starting to think about January and February, and so the kind of cooling off is fairly normal. So I don't see any alarms there. That's just what it is. And I think I'll leave it to you to decide, if happy days are here again, but at least certainly better days. Couple little snapshots on prices and things that are moving prices. One of the questions I get asked is the guy who came up with the idea for a 3-year cycle 15 years ago or whatever it was anyway, I often get asked, do you think there still is a 3-year cycle? And my answer is, yeah, I do. Now, I also always say, this isn't a roller coaster where the car always follows the track. This is a tendency. So if you've got some dramatic market event like $7 corn or a recession, of course that's going to make a difference. So of course it's off of just what the cycle would give you by itself. And that's what we see when we see this low not really being as low as some of the previous ones. But nevertheless, this cyclical pattern is still emerging, and we are due for a rise, and we're expecting a rise. It may not be gigantic, but we're talking about getting up in this neighborhood for 2017. Feed costs, of course, the big story there is we're still pumping out ethanol, and the corn growers are saying, well, hey, everybody said ethanol was the reason why corn went up, but gosh, we produced more ethanol in December than we ever did since we started making ethanol, and obviously we got $3 corn, and corn growers are unhappy. So obviously ethanol had nothing to do with it. Maybe the corn growers had to make that speech. But what it shows is that supply response. And so we got plenty of corn growing around, and that's the reason why the price came down. And the demand effect that brought it up is still there, but we just have more supply against that demand than we used to. I think everybody in the corn business, and for that matter, any other kind of grain crop, oilseeds as well, their conversation is, yeah, prices are better than they were before ethanol, but before ethanol, I didn't pay $10,000 an acre for the land that I'm farming, and this $3 corn is actually kind of squeezing me a little bit. And they don't see any real end in sight to that, nor do I. I think we're probably looking at the $3.50 to $4.25 corn for the foreseeable future, and whether it's one or the other is going to depend on the usual kind of variations in production and so on. The other thing that I think we need to remember, and you guys know this far more intimately than I do, is, when I was a kid, sometimes the corn was great and sometimes it wasn't. And rained a lot, or it was too dry, and it made a difference. And now it's like, you read for 3 months about the third act of God that Moses visited American farmers. Oh my goodness, and then it's, by the way, they got a new record in Cornell. Okay. It's amazing the resilience that we now have in the genetics crops that really seem to be maybe not impervious, but awful darn resistant to a lot of abuse that years before gave us a lot more pressure. And that's one of the reasons why I think you're not going to see even as much of the sort of normal ups and downs in these product markets, grain markets, as we once did. That chart makes all kinds of sense if you're more of a mathematician. I'm just going to point to this line. These are prices. These are month-to-month changes in the price of milk going back to 1910. And all this is really showing you is that we had a lot of price variation in the early part of the 20th century, and actually more than we have now. This is the price support era where public policy really clamped down on that price variation. This line is a statistic that tries to measure volatility. So when it's up here, that means volatility is high. When it's down here, that means volatility is low. And what this chart is showing us is we definitely have more volatility than we had when price supports were very active. This was the 1930s, so actually it's kind of comparable to what we saw in the 30s. It's less than what we had before that, but before that, this other period, that was seasonal variation. Big difference between March and November. Now what we have is more cyclical variation, which is a little bit harder to predict. And my point here is simply, we're going to continue to see volatility, but I think it's going to be a little bit less than some levels we saw about a decade ago, which means probably, somebody said, when are we going to have $24 milk again? And I said, when we have $7 corn again. So I think we're going to see prices that are able for people to make a profit, but you can't measure that against a $20 price when you've got $3, $50, $4 corn. The graph here, I'm not going to focus on the numbers, but I want to focus on the question. And this is something I think it's important for you to think about. I think it's important for you to think about in terms of how you talk to elected officials, wherever they are, whether they're Albany or Washington, whether it's the Commissioner of Agriculture or your local assemblyman or congressman. And that is, I get asked regularly, how bad is it? Okay, well, first of all, there's like no one answer to a question like that. But it also begs the question, how do you know? How do you measure if it's bad? Bad in what way? And I think, I don't think, I'm going to tell you, 40 years ago, when somebody said, how bad is it? The answer was pricing. It was this, now it's, it was 12 and now it's 9. It was 9 and now it's 6. But that was it. And if you set a number, hey, boy, you see the changes coming out, it's something about $16 plastic price. And bam, everybody in the industry has got an idea what that means. And I responded to it. Well, sorry. My hand was going to now that's not so straightforward because we've got lots of different conditions, and of course we learned that the price of food makes a difference to people as well. So what do we use? Okay, maybe we can still talk about the price of milk. Maybe we can still, maybe that means something. But what else do we have to bring to the table when somebody says, "How bad is it?" What's my answer? And I think we need a better answer than we have. This margin is now being kind of used by a lot of folks as the measure of this is how bad it is. You happy with that? Does that feel good? No. Okay. So we need to think about what kind of number can I pull together that has integrity, that's not just some made up thing that, I can understand where it came from, that doesn't take me a year to collect, that's, fairly current. And of course, it can't possibly be perfect, but it can be better than what we've got now. Can we improve on it? How can we talk about it? And I think that's something we ought to spend more time on. I keep lecturing people like the Commissioner of Agriculture and the Secretary of Agriculture and saying, we really should spend some time on, getting better measures here. And they go, oh yeah, okay, oh gosh. And so, but I think that it's something we ought to be able to do a better job of than we have been. And maybe it's not just one number, but it does need to be simple and it does need to be transparent, but it also needs to be meaningful. And I think we have a little bit of a problem with getting traction on people paying attention to us because it's hard to figure out, was 2015 a bad year? Well, that's what this number says was 2015. So, okay, I get that it was worse than 2014, but I don't know, it doesn't look that bad to me. What's bad about that? This, okay, that's worse, I get that, and that's the game we're in. How bad is it? And when the rhetoric, the narrative from producers doesn't match up with any number you can look at, it kind of undermines the persuasiveness of your rhetoric. One of the things I'd love to make more of a lecture of, but of course this is more Jason's thing than mine, but I want to use it a little bit anyway, is what really is the problem when you're saying it's bad? Okay, what is it you're talking about? Well, these three categories of financial performance, profitability, solvency, liquidity, are things that people in any business understand. All of them are a reflection of how well your business is performing, but they're not the same number. You can be very profitable and not have enough cash to go to the feed store and pay off your bill. You can have all kinds of liquidity and not be very profitable. Most of what we talk about in dairy, I would say, when we talk about MPP dairy, when we talk about how are things on the farm, we're talking about profitability measures. We're talking about net revenue per cow, the margin. Those are profitability measures. My personal feeling is that for a lot of producers, when they start saying I'm having a hard time, the real issue is liquidity. That I'm not making enough money. My check isn't coming in big enough for me to pay all my bills. That's a liquidity problem more so than a profitability. I mean, they can be both, but that particular issue is a liquidity issue. All of our policies are oriented towards this problem. We don't hardly have any policies oriented towards that problem. And one of the things I'm trying to help people think about is, can we come up with some ideas related to liquidity and addressing that issue with the idea that maybe profitability is not a long-term issue, but at this particular moment in time, liquidity is an issue. That's another one I think we ought to think about a little bit more than we do. I don't want to spend a huge amount of time on policy. I already kind of started there, but the big idea that is being talked about with respect to MPP dairy is focusing on the formula. And as some of you probably know, maybe a few even remember, the original formula that National Milk proposed and which Congressman Peterson wrote into a bill and which was ultimately passed by the House was a certain formula. When it got to the Senate, the senators looked at it, they kind of liked the idea, but they decided that it cost too much. And in the infinite wisdom of somebody who doesn't know diddly about policy, but knows how to do multiplication on a calculator, they multiplied the feed cost by 0.9. So overnight, your feed cost was 10% less than it was, the week before. And that's what ended up getting passed. So one of the things that comes up is, why don't we go back to the original formula, put that 10% back in. Of course, 10% is a different actual number if the price of corn is high or low, but it ends up being in the vicinity of $1. So when when the current margin says it's $8, the revised or the original formula would have said it's about $7. And they didn't change the 4 to 8. I mean, that part was the same, but it just made it $1 harder to hit it than it was with the original formula. Now, I think if that would have come in, or as it was written the first time, there would probably still be some people that were a little dissatisfied with MPP dairy, but a heck of a lot more people would have got payments, We would have seen a lot more people buying up in 2016 because they weren't all annoyed about 2015. We would have had some serious payment in the summer of 2016. And I think the crabbiness about that program would be entirely different. You tell me, but I'm wondering how many farmers are looking at NPV Gary's and say, yeah, I appreciate it, I'm moving on. And I don't know if it's redeemable, but that's exactly what they're working with. Of course, the flip side of that coin is Congress is going to estimate it as being more expensive, and will they actually pass it? But that's what that conversation is about. There's a little bit of conversation about LGM dairy along the lines of making it more affordable and making it more available, so that it's not just something you really do in 1 or 2 or 3 months at the beginning of the fiscal year, but actually something you can use year round. That's not a program for everybody, but it could be a pretty reasonable program for a number of folks, but it needs a little bit of improvement. I'll move on from that. I want to talk a little bit about supply and demand balance and ultimately getting in the direction of dumping and what that means, especially for the Northeast, although it's not limited to the Northeast market. I think we have that problem a little bit more so than other places, but actually other parts of the U.S. have been experiencing something similar. I get asked pretty regularly, so if there's milk dumping, that must mean there's a big surplus. It's like, yeah, actually, that's not really the same thing. And I'm going to tell you why I say that. This chart is showing the difference between U.S. milk production and U.S. milk consumption, not just beverage milk and cheese and all that stuff, but just in the U.S. So when you look at this milk production line being below the consumption line, that would sound like we've got an imbalance between production and consumption. Well, in fact, what's actually going on is we're having trade. So that's the part that's the difference between those two lines. That isn't a problem. That isn't overproduction because we've got another place to sell. Some people look at that and say, you know, we're vulnerable. I would say, no, not so much. I mean, yeah, we want to be sure we maintain that trade relationship, but I don't think this should be thought of as something like an overproduction problem. This is what milk dumping looks like in the Northeast dairy order, starting with 2009. Obviously every month, so the amounts in every month. Let me help you kind of sort out what I'm trying to say here. 2011 to 2013 is this line that is at the bottom. And I'm going to say the average for those 3 years is kind of like a baseline. So every year, every month, there's a certain amount of milk that can't be sold commercially. It came into the plant and it failed some tests. The truck turned over and went in the ditch. We got an ice storm and couldn't be delivered. That's just part of normal business. And I can tell you as a percentage of total milk in the Northeast order, it's way less than 1%. And in a dairy plant, if you had 1% shrink, you'd say, okay, that's not too bad. I'd like it a little lower, but that's kind of normal. Okay, so that's like, don't worry about that. 2009 to 2010 is this line right here, which is a little higher. 2009, 2010 was the Great Recession. We're coming out of the Great Recession, obviously, in 2010, but we had an income. So what this, I think, demonstrates is in a year when you have stress on demand because of low household incomes, you will probably experience a little higher level of milk that can't be sold, that goes beyond just the normal baseline. But, oh gosh, it's pretty small. And the other thing I want you to notice is the seasonal pattern, the month-to-month pattern, isn't really that much different. Everything is shifted up. It's not like December somehow something was really different. Where you really start to see the differences is when you get to 2014, 15, and 16. So this green line here is 2014, this is 2015, this is 2016. So two things pop out. One, this dumping stuff that's been going on since 2014 is now a parallel shift up. It's happening at specific times of the year, and it's getting worse. 2015 was quite a bit worse than 2014. 2016 was particularly dramatically worse in the middle of the year. At the end of the year, not quite so much. What is that? Mostly what this is not that somehow suddenly in June we got a big jump in milk production. This is about plant utilization. It's not about overproduction. It's about the plant was closed and I couldn't deliver my milk. There's a number that's really important in the dairy industry that is not shown in federal order data, but it's a real thing, and it's called distressed milk. So what's distressed milk? Your cooperative works hard every day to find as good a customer as they can find for the milk you have. Some of the milk they sell, they make a nice premium on. Some of the milk they sell, they don't make such a big premium on. That's just the way it works. Some people are in a high margin market, some companies can't afford to pay a premium. Every now and then, there's a load of milk. Maybe it's on a Saturday when the plant was closed. Maybe the processor had a fire or strike or electricity went off or something. And suddenly you find yourself with 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loads of milk that you can't deliver. That the place where you're planning on taking it can't for whatever reason. Well, you know, sell it or smell it, right? So you can't just sit around and say, oh, I don't know, maybe sometime next May we'll find a buyer. You got to figure out something to do with that, like right now. That's distressed milk. That's like when you go to the grocery store and you got this nice cut of beef that's just a little bit turned a little brown and it's got a on sale today. That's what's going on with distressed milk. And what happens is the guy working for the co-op in New York says, hey, Larry, how's things in Michigan? Huh? Yeah, whoa, a little snow. I'm okay. This is Bruce, and yeah, I got 4 loads of milk. Can you take it? And then the question is, no, I can't, or yes, I can. What's the discount? And when you sell distressed milk, you're usually talking in the vicinity of 50%, maybe less, maybe more. It's pooled milk. It's sold. It found a commercial home, but you sold it at a loss just because you didn't want to smell it. Right? Well, now Bruce calls up Larry in Michigan, and Larry says, "Are you kidding me? We got more milk than we do." Okay, sorry. You call up, hey Jennifer, how things in Wisconsin? You got? Oh, you don't have any either. And you call up, you know, whoever, Lucas in Missouri, and Lucas says, "Yeah, I can take it." And then you do the thing, and you go, "This is ridiculous. I can't afford to haul this stuff out to Missouri. I could get rid of it, but I'm going to tie up 2 drivers. I'm going to tie up a rig. I'm going to deadhead back 1,500 miles. Screw it. I'm just going to get rid of this stuff. I lose less by dumping it than by moving it apart." That's what's been happening. Why this has been up. What I don't know is how does this line compare to distressed milk sales that existed here, but they didn't show up because you didn't dump it. You just showed it. You just sold it at a 50% discount. I don't know what that is. I think some of this is milk that previously would have been sold at a deep discount that we just decided we couldn't because, you know, Larry and Jennifer in Michigan and Wisconsin were full, and in 2009 they weren't. I think that's a part of it. Do we need another milk plant because of this? Well, you look at something like this and you say, yeah, I could use another milk plant in July. The thing is, you got to pay for that milk plant in January, February, March, and November. And is there milk available for a new plant all year round? There are some people I've talked to that have estimated that there might be 1 million to 1.5 million pounds of milk a day in New York that would love to have a better home than it has now. Some of that is distressed milk, some of that is dump milk, and some of that is just a crappy customer that you'd like to have somebody else take that would pay you more money. Well, 1 million and 1.5 million pounds a day, that's a serious plant. That's not like the biggest ever. I mean, people are building new plants in the West at 8, 10 million pounds a day, but that's like a serious plant. So possibly there's some room for discussion there. Just a little bit on what might be some more interesting developments on the demand side. What do we think is going to happen with export markets in 2017? We looked at the USDA numbers. A little bit of optimism on those numbers compared to previous years that were not so good. I would say long term, we're feeling pretty confident about export markets. We know, we're keenly aware that New Zealand and Australia are very potent competitors. Their issue is, will they have milk? And I'm not suggesting that they won't, but they're much more vulnerable to weather and the quality of their pasture than we are, and so they have ups and downs, and we can take advantage of that, or we may find it's a little harder for us. Europe, I think, has a strong niche in two ways. One is they have some products that are very highly regarded, particularly cheese, and they have a natural advantage in serving North Africa and Western Asia, which are big dairy consuming areas, by the way. And so it's a little harder for us to go there. We've put more of our eggs in the Asian basket, and so then that begs the question, how strong are those economies? And I would say we continue to be pretty optimistic. I would also say that kind of like if you think about what happened to corn and ethanol, we rode the rocket up pretty much, and now the rocket is going to kind of taper a little. So that doesn't mean it's falling to the earth, but it means the exhilarating ride probably is over, and now we're just in a little more normal business mode. So I don't see us going from 15 to 20 to 25% of the U.S. milk supply and exports over the next 10 years or anything like it. But I think it's going to be a good, solid part of our market. I think we're going to improve it. I think we're going to grow margins in that market. I think it's a good story. I talked a little bit also about whole milk. One of the things that I'm kind of interested in seeing if it's going to change under the new administration, I gotta believe it will, but it doesn't until it does, is to restore a more full set of options in school lunch programs for milk. The fact of the matter is, even though nobody voted for Michelle Obama, she exerted a lot of influence in trying to get schools to serve what she thought were healthy meals. And that got translated to skim chocolate milk and skim or low-fat milk. We've now got a consensus in the research community that recommendation does not have scientific merit in terms of supporting healthful diets. And I think we've got a president and a secretary of agriculture who are likely to be more receptive to saying, no, let's allow schools to buy whatever kind of milk they want. I don't think they're going to force them to take whole milk, but I think they might very well say, we don't care what you buy whatever kind of milk you want, and we'll qualify for reimbursement. To me, that would be the single most important thing we could do on the demand side, because we now have a generation, at least, of young people who didn't grow up with milk. And I don't know, you tell me, but I don't think a lot of us come up at the age of 35 and go, oh no, oh yeah, wow, let's start. So if you don't get that when you're young, it's pretty hard to imagine that's going to change a lot when you get older. A nice cheese, some fancy ice cream, maybe, but I think that's a huge issue for us on the demand side with milk. Yogurt, other cultured products, I'm not pessimistic about those, but I think that rocket is also kind of curbing. I think what we're going to see now is more focus on extensions and getting fancy and mixing with expensive ingredients and that sort of thing. I don't want to sound negative, but I don't think we're going to see a lot of volume there. What I think is we're going to see more margin there. Cheese, somewhat similarly. The story on cheese is still pretty good. Restaurant consumption continues to be the driver for mozzarella and American-style cheese, which is to say pizza and hamburgers. But more and more people are getting excited about fancy cheeses, and any of you that shop at Wegmans know that Wegmans has put a gigantic effort into creating a really amazing cheese department, and other grocery stores that are following them. That started already. They're a leader in that category anyhow, and we're going to see a lot more attention. And the reason why is because these places have come to the understanding that people who want to shop because you got a really nice cheese department will increase store sales, and they'll be the ones that buy high margin products not, you know, the family pack of rice or whatever. Super milks. How many of you have seen the Fairlife product in the grocery stores? Okay, how many of you have purchased? Couple hands. How many of you buy it regularly? Yeah. So there you go. In the Ithaca store, we've got, I don't know, 40, 50 feet of dairy cooler space, which, you know, includes eggs and includes stuff we don't like to talk about and maybe some pickles, but it's a big space. And it has 4 facings of Fairlife product, which is to say 1 skim, 1 2%, 1 whole, 1 chocolate. That tells you right there they're not selling a hell of a lot of that stuff. But they used to have 2, and now have 4, so okay, the trend is good. Fairlife milk is a milk product that has, what, 3 times the protein, twice the calcium, half the sugar. Pardon? Yeah, right. No antibiotics. And also, except for the lactase, which is like lactate milk, the only thing that's in there is stuff that came from a cow. So it's like real milk. It's not some, you know, oddball formulated thing. There are a lot of people who are watching this product to see whether or not it catches. It would be like a value-added, high-margin milk product. I look at that and I say, you know, if I'm a single mom and I got 4 kids and, you know, I'm struggling to make ends meet, yeah, that's probably not the product I'm going to buy. But if I'm 60+ years old and I love milk, but I don't drink as much as I used to, but I want to get the nutrients, I can spend $3 on a container of that milk and say, this works for me, this is good. I don't know if it's a niche or if it's more than a niche, but it's something that's kind of testing some new ground to see whether or not this could be a way to build profitability back into the fluid milk business. I think it's worth paying attention to. Pretty close to our lunch hour, and I don't want to invade on that too much. I'll just make a couple of quick comments about this. The New York City market has recalibrated relative to the Elmhurst closing, but that's a work in progress. I think we're going to find ongoing changes in how milk is sold in New York City, which is unlike anywhere else in the United States. The New York City School District is recalibrated, but they're not done yet. There's some really interesting stories about a city that thought it knew something about buying milk and now has got a whole different level of lesson about what it takes to bring milk into a gigantic school system. 760,000 servings of milk a day. Little servings, but servings. That's a work in progress. I think it's one the dairy industry needs to pay really close attention to because it's a gigantic market. It's a really important one for us, and we want to be sure we don't lose momentum in that. That's not necessarily the farmer's job to worry about that, but it's one I think the dairy industry needs to pay attention to. What's happening to the shuttered plant in Batavia? I don't work for DFA, you'll have to ask them, but certainly that could be the 1 to 1.5 million pounds of milk a day, or it might just be that somebody moves down the road from an old plant, takes in a new plant, and actually doesn't increase total plant capacity that much. We'll see how that sorts itself out. I think the new Secretary of Agriculture is going to have a different attitude about trade than the new president will. I hope so. But one of the things that the dairy industry is trying respectfully to do with the new administration is to say we actually like trade. We'd like more trade. We don't think it's going to be a real big advantage to us to make our customers unhappy with us. So we're trying to factor that in. California, wow. How many of you want to move to California? It's lots of interesting stuff going there. I think we'll hear the California federal regulation story start to come with a recommended decision maybe in a month or so. And remember, that's just another step in a long process. The recommended decision will create conversation in California, and they'll have to decide if they like it or not. But I think there's also a potential that what USDA proposes for California could become of interest to all the other federal orders, in the sense of, you're going to do that in California? Well, oh, God, if you're going to do that in California, you better think about how that's going to affect us here in Wisconsin, New York, whatever. And so I think this is something that is not going to be only a California implication. And I talked a little bit about farm bill. So I think that's it. To those of you in someplace else who found me fading in and out, I apologize for not standing 2 feet from the microphone all the time, and I apologize to my host for having to chase me around with that. Anybody in the audience that is now feeling bold enough to talk, I think we could probably do that for a few minutes if you'd like to.
We have one question on the from the chat box here. Does U.S. milk market fit the pattern of tragedy of the commons, and as such require national supply control to level playing field for U.S. dairy farmers?
I want this guy's email. That is a really interesting question if you're an economist and you know a little bit about what the tragedy of the commons means. And I think actually that there's merit to that line of thinking, and I've actually used that argument in talking with some people. The tragedy of the commons comes from an English tradition of having a green space that anybody could use for pasture. And what happens, surprise, surprise, is it's overgrazed because it's not my responsibility, and I'm a dummy if I'm not the one that gets my sheep or cows out there and tries to crowd yours out. And so we overuse a resource because there's no natural steward of that resource. And I do think actually there is some merit to thinking about dairy in that vein, but that's like a completely wild, bigger topic that I'll just let fly there.
Andy, Canadian changing their rules, what might go from New York into Canada?
Yeah, so Canada.
Repeat the question.
Yes, Jason asked a question about what's going on with respect to Canadian changes in their policy that have affected our ability to sell milk proteins there that for a while have been a pretty nice piece of business for a couple of plants in New York and a plant in Wisconsin. Some of you remember, are old enough to remember, when we were feeling abused by casein imports coming into the United States. Most of you are old enough to remember not too long ago, we had a very similar deal with milk protein concentrate coming into the United States. Well, now we're the one that's selling these kinds of products into Canada. There's a loophole in the Canadian-US agreement, NAFTA, for a product that didn't exist when that agreement was written 25, 30 years ago. And we figured out, oh gosh, we could do this. And Canadian companies have found out they can buy this product from New York and Wisconsin a heck of a lot cheaper, or even at all, compared to what they can get in Canada for milk. And so we were setting up a pretty good volume of these skim solids that were being used primarily in cheese. This became the #1, bar none, issue for Canadian dairy farmers. And you can bet they had people working night and day to figure out how to close up that loophole. And within their system, which is kind of complicated, and I'm not going to sort of describe here, basically Ontario, the major province, created a new price class that allows a Canadian cheesemaker to buy Canadian milk at a low enough price that they don't want to come shopping in New York anymore. This has generated all kinds of conversations at the political level. Albany to Ontario, Albany to Ottawa, Washington to Ottawa, special trade representative, Senator Schumer, Senator Baldwin from Wisconsin, blah, blah, blah. It is 100% crystal clear that if this goes to the World Trade Organization for a ruling on the legality of the Canadian move, that Canada will lose. Problem with that scenario is it's going to take 5 to 10 years. And by that time, you know, who cares? We're going to be long gone from that. The Canadians agreed to hold off on their new plan until February. But I think the new administration isn't going to be anywhere near ready to represent the U.S. dairy industry in a trade negotiation by February 1st. I mean, the guy doesn't even get inaugurated until the 20th. And I think probably the Canadians will go ahead and do this. We'll see. But that's the issue. It is not a U.S. dairy industry issue, but it is kind of a New York issue and a Wisconsin issue, and it's certainly an issue for those three companies. Yes, sir.
Does distress milk basically is that based on a national supply of milk versus the factories to manufacture the milk, or is it based on decisions of the co-ops basically, and either poor decisions and that might impact certain farmers more than others?
Yeah, so a good question. So that issue is more local than national, although it happens in lots of different places. Every part of the U.S. has this issue. But what happens in California doesn't create distressed milk in New York. What happens in New York creates distressed milk in New York. And it's very much an organizational thing, and it's very much a co-op thing, because the fact of the matter is co-ops get stuck balancing the market. That's, you know, cheesemakers, private cheesemakers on their own, Burned Dairy on their own, they don't balance the milk market. The co-ops are the ones that are stuck with that. I don't know that I'd fault cooperatives for the fact that Hamdi Ulukaya decided to give his employees a 4-day holiday last Christmas, and suddenly you found out you had 4 days where the plant was going to be closed. It's not like some, you know, failing on the part of the co-op. They were the ones stuck with dealing with the problem. What I think we are seeing is that co-ops are a lot less interested in investing in balancing plants. Neil's Cooperative has made a huge investment in a plant in Springfield, and they're saying, we're taking care of our own problem. We're not volunteering to take care of everybody's problem, but we're going to take care of our problem. Upstate Niagara, through OATCA, has made the same commitment. So, you know, we're going to do this, but we're not going to do it for everybody. This is about our members. And other cooperatives have said, I'm not going to build a plant that's empty too much of the year and never makes any money. And they've decided it would be cheaper to deal with it by selling it at a distressed price or even dumping it than to own an unprofitable plant.
Yeah, but a co-op makes a decision like on Elmhurst. I think Elmhurst is unfairly impacting a special co-op over other co-ops that refuse to take on any additional milk. Therefore, the rebalancing costs on people that belong to that co-op are facing more pressure than a co-op that does not accept milk from farmers.
Yeah, you're right. And you know, gigantic opportunity for me to step on toes here, but I'm gonna say that I think our grandparents looked each other in the face and said, you know, we're all in this together. And, you know, maybe one day it's me and maybe the next day it's you, but, you know, we're going to be in this together and we're going to share this load. And I'm going to help you build your barn and you're going to help me thrash the corn, and we're going to join this co-op. And I think what we learned through the Eastern and Dairy League, reblends, and every other thing that old enough people remember, that there's a lot more of us who are now saying, you know, I feel for you, but I'm going to take care of my problem. You go take care of your problem. And I think that makes it, that environment has changed in my lifetime. And that makes it a lot harder for a cooperative to say, let's do this for the good of the market, as opposed to let's do it for the good of the people that signed up to belong to my organization. And I think that's partly just a reflection of the way people are focusing and thinking about their industry now compared to what it used to be.
So you don't see that change, that they get together and so one co-op doesn't take on dairies because of the fact they didn't have a home, and it affects one co-op more than another.
Well, again, I'm going to say, when you say co-ops get together, what it really boils down to is not co-op managers, but co-op boards of directors and their farmers. If co-op boards of directors believe that their farmers were telling them, we need to do this for the good of the industry, I think they'd say, okay, we'll figure out how to make it work. But if they don't have a very clear voice in that direction, then it's not going to happen. I do think there are some things the federal government could do that would make it easier to do market-wide balancing. and that would be to create a special payment for a cooperative plant that genuinely demonstrated it was taking milk it didn't want for the good of the entire market. That's feasible. I can lay out how that could work. It's not, it's not so easy that you just write it down in a minute. There'd be negotiation.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get a co-op that closes availability to farmers. It wouldn't be in the interest of the board to say, yeah, let's take it on. But from the government side, it would be a more fair.
I think that could be done. I have talked about that probably for 10 or 15 years. And that's another one of those where they go, oh yeah, well, okay, yeah, you got to go down. So it could happen. And I think if anything happened, that would be the way it would happen. But I don't see a big move in that direction just yet. Yeah.
So would you care to speculate on what kind of a financial impact that might have on a year-long price requirement?
So Ed's question was, if we had a balancing payment from the federal order to subsidize the cost of an actual genuine balancing plant, what would be the hit on the all milk price in an average year? Obviously, that begs the question of just how aggressive this balancing payment was. But I'm going to say, unless we're trying to create a situation where the butter powder plant was, making money and you wanted to build more of them, a more reasonable balancing charge would be pennies on an annual price.
And if you have a question from the chat box, do you have any comments on the slowing expansion of the organic milk market? And does the ultra pasteurization and taste have anything to do with that slowdown?
I don't think that the ultra pasteurization thing does, because that's been the way that product has been sold, at least in major chains, forever. And if it's genuinely a taste issue, we would have seen that before. If it's a like, oh, I didn't realize it issue, okay, that could be a little bit more new. But I don't think it's that so much. I think, I don't know exactly what the numbers are. I don't follow it that closely. But obviously on the production side, the big issue is usually, can I get enough feed? And what are the conditions that allow me to expand or grow that side? On the demand side, that's a pretty income sensitive consumption. When there's a baseline of folks that are just committed to that product. They've just made that choice. They don't really care that much what the price is. But when we see the price of conventional milk and the price of organic milk get close because conventional milk is high, then we see people going to organic because they think, oh, for another 50 cents, I could get organic, so I guess I will. When that price starts to drop, then we see people moving away from organic because the price makes a bigger difference. Well, the price of milk has been dropping. So this is exactly the condition that gives people who otherwise might have been an organic to say, I can't afford to pay that premium. So to me, it's consistent with the normal ebb and flow of those price relationships.
Got a two-part question about Canada. How many more trailer loads a day of distressed milk will there be starting February 1st? And long-term, how much longer can they hold on to their system when you think about what's happened all over the world with quota systems?
I don't know. I certainly can't give you a number like 3 loads, but I think more generically what I would say is the plants that are selling MPCs obviously have capacity to process milk. I don't know exactly how it relates to their dryer capacity, but I'm going to say if you could have done that, you can make skim milk powder, you can make non-fat dry milk. So I think the consequence is not milk that you can't process, but milk that you're not going to make any money on. So they were making some money on these fancy milk proteins. Now they're going to be stuck with non-fat dry milk, and they're not going to make any money. But it's not going to be dump milk or distressed milk in the more dramatic sense of that word. How long can Canada hold on? Wow. I think a really long time. I'm going to be, golfing or something by the time they get done with it. It's a classic example of a small group of people who have like one and only one thing that they care about versus a huge group of people that can get excited for a little while when the news story came out, but They go to the store and they look and they find a really nice dairy product, and they've been spending that price all along, and you know, they just don't see that there's a problem. If you say, hey, you realize, you know, you could spend 50% less on that milk, you go, oh yeah, okay. And then we'd be more dependent on the U.S. Heck with those guys. And, you know, so it's hard to get the politics in place to make that change. I think ultimately it will happen because of trade, but it's pretty durable.
Two more chat questions as well. Okay. Is there a future for the cooperative farm system model, or will there be more direct contracting between large farmers and processors and multinational corporations?
How many toes you want to step on then?
And yeah, so why don't we go
Yeah.
with that one first?
Okay, so the answer is yes. I think it's plain as day that there are all kinds of entrepreneurial farmers who are finding other solutions that they like. And this includes the big guys that build their own plants. This includes the much more modest sized folks that decide to do farmstead processing or get together and maybe make a smaller plant that they think has got some local cachet or whatever. I think it's undeniable that that is a trend. But the fact of the matter is, it's not that darn easy. So, you know, it's not like everybody's going to sit around and say, well, hey, there's the golden goose. Let's just go grab a couple eggs. So, yeah, we'll see that. But there's going to be a lot of folks that don't want to monkey around with marketing, that actually don't have that great a marketing opportunity. I mean, in New York, we think about this because we're so close to these gigantic cities. But imagine yourself in Kentucky or Idaho. You know, farmstead yogurt production in Idaho, who the hell do you sell that to? And so, you know, from that standpoint, there's a limitation on how far that can go. And for good, sensible economic reasons. If the question is, do you think we'll see a little bit more of the U.S. milk supply shift away from conventional old school co-ops towards these kind of different ideas? I would say yes, but I don't see co-ops as the dominant marketing agent for farmers changing anytime soon.
One more question here. What would the impact of a U.S. easing of Russian sanctions be to dairy? What's the chance?
Yeah, the big impact of easing Russian sanctions, other than, you know, Trump would have more Russian products in the White House, is that Europe wouldn't have to look to us to buy their product because they could go back to selling it to Russia. And that would be pretty important. The people, the story I like to tell, how many of you could put your finger on Lithuania if you were given a map of the world? Okay, Lithuania is like some kind of Vermont of Europe. It's small, but it's a real serious dairy area with a long and proud tradition in the dairy industry. And their number one customer was Russia. Of course, they used to be under the influence of the Soviet Union. And they don't have a common border, but they're really close. Russia slams the door, Lithuania loses that overnight. Guess who the number one customer of Lithuania is today? The United States of America. We're not the only customer, but we are now the number one customer. You lose your big customer, what do? You go look for another big, rich customer, right? You don't go selling milk to the Philippines. You go looking for another big place that can take some stuff. So that's had some implications for us, and I think that would be the benefit. Not that we would sell to Russia, although God knows what Trump would do, but that we would have less pressure from Europe looking for an alternative market.
When you mentioned the Philippines or you mentioned Vietnam and all this, is there any way to go ahead and utilize our wonderful northern climate where cows like to be to supply countries? And this comes from me. I've been actually with Tro Bui to Vietnam 3 times. They're making 15 liters a day, and the cows, I'm not comfortable, so the cows aren't comfortable because it's too hot. Yet there is always this thing, you know, we got to have Vietnamese milk, or we got to have, and actually tomorrow I go to India, where they've actually, I understand, said we're not going to import any milk. we're going to make it all local. We look at it from a global sense of global warming and all this. These cows are making so much less than what's being made around the corner here, and all of that. And, you know, I'd love to get a boat and put Cayuga products on it in powdered milk and send it there and properly mix it up, and then backload the boat with their delicious pineapple and watermelon and so forth that we can't grow here. Is there anybody addressing this in any way? I mean, and now we're pulling away from it. It seems like a global trade of what's
so India is a different deal, because India is the largest milk producing country in the world, and they got special reasons why that works. And so I'm going to set India aside. But the biggest customer for U.S. dairy exports in a regional sense isn't China, it's Southeast Asia. So yes, we're talking about several countries, not one country. But the point is, these several tiny countries actually take up more exports than China, or at least have several times over the last 4 or 5 years. So they are important. Has anybody thought about this? Is anybody doing anything about it? When are we going to recognize? And I'm going to go, Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's what we were trying to do with that. And the dairy industry was generally supportive of TPP, even though it had some trade-offs, because of exactly that reason. And to walk away from that is to make it harder to develop that market.